Hi to all! Well, long time no see. I hope you enjoy this video and a little voice experiment. I will wait for feedback in the comments. Today I will be building a model of the AH-64D Apache helicopter. And no, it's not the hot new stuff from Takam or Meng. It's a good old Hasagawa in 48 scale, and I'll be using an amount of resin aftermarket that I've never used before. Also, as usual, 3D printed cockpit decals and 3D printed parts and some etching. In the box, we are met a lot of gray plastic, a frame of transparent parts and a decal of excellent quality. And oh yes, this is a very strange instruction. There are no additional masks for Anapi or at least a small etching in the set. The model is really old, it was released back in 2001. But she is still relevant, and has no equal in the 48th scale. And as time showed, the assembly is very good. Well, let's begin. Classically, we start with the cockpit. Namely, preparation of plastic for assembly and cleaning of surfaces for gluing 3D decals. In this case, a knife, sandpaper, Dremel and a bit of accuracy will come in handy so as not to say goodbye to your fingers. It is important for me to keep the workplace clean. A small battery vacuum cleaner helps me with this. The side panels are given as a separate part, which made it easier to clean the plastic from the relief. In fact, the cockpit is remarkably simple, consists of few parts, and can be assembled in one evening. And by the way, if you like what I'm doing and want to support me, then like this video and subscribe to the channel. I will be very grateful to you. Also, watch the previous videos, I think you will find something interesting for you there. And also, subscribers who want to receive exclusive content, have insider information, participate in the selection of the next builds and get the opportunity to watch videos before everyone else, can become sponsors of my channel, link in the upper right corner. On the pilot's seats there was an imitation of the seat belts. I cleaned them with a grinding stone and a Dremel. Primer from Ammo MiG One-Shot Black. Since the cockpit is also black, it will be the main color. I have been using this acrylic primer for a very long time. It has proven itself as a good product. But in most cases, I don't use it for external surfaces, but for such details as cockpits, pilot seats, and landing gear it's perfect. And sometimes also for weapons. I mostly use nitro primer on the outer surfaces of my model aircraft. It is more resistant to mechanical damage and has better adhesion with plastic and later with paint. The pilot seats are also black, except for the soft parts, which I paint in dark green. Next, without applying varnish, I wash with light gray oil paint and remove the remains of solvent and a cotton swab. On this model, like most others, I used 3D decals from the Ukrainian manufacturer Kelik. They are of good print quality, have a very nice 3D effect and have a complete seat belt, something that most manufacturers cannot boast of. The application of 3D decals is very simple. Cut off the part we need, immerse in water for a few seconds, and wait a bit until the decal separates from the paper base. I fixed the decals on the plastic with cyanoacrylate glue. 3D decals are the shortest way to make the cockpit of your model more like the real. Also paints the metal parts of the belts with MIG polished metal paints for more realism. When assembling the finished cockpit, you need to be very careful, as the decals are very soft and can be easily damaged. Applying the decals took me no more than an hour. And here is the final result. It's time for heavy artillery. And it's really heavy both in build and weight. Resin engines are also from the Ukrainian manufacturer Metallic Details. Excellent casting quality, excellent surface and rivet detailing. The resin requires a little bit of machining on the parts before assembly. Always use water and a protective respirator when working with resin parts. The fumes and dirt are toxic and must be prevented from entering the human body. For the sake of fairness, I will say that there is no need to be afraid of resin. It is only harmful if it gets into the respiratory tract since it is heavy and settles in the lungs. But it does not pose any threat to the skin, eyes, and other organs. You need to cut off unnecessary parts on the model and prepare the surface for installation. The resin parts are almost perfectly in place. For reliable fixation, I decided to make holes in the places of attachment and glue the motors with a large amount of thick cyanoacrylate glue to reliably fix them on the plastic because the resin is very heavy and I was afraid of accidentally breaking them off during further assembly. Also, before assembling the two halves of the fuselage, you need to make many holes for the future attachment of antennas and handles. Now everything is ready. You can glue the cockpit in place and connect the two halves of the fuselage. I fixed the halves with paper tape and give the glue some time to dry before continuing the assembly. For a perfect connection of parts, I glue them in several steps to avoid unevenness. The parts came together quite well with no visible displacements or gaps. However, a small amount of putty will still be needed. A little time for grinding and the visibility of the seams almost completely disappears. Now it is possible to glue several parts to the fuselage before proceeding with the assembly. Of course, we will not stop at only aftermarket engines. These are 3D printed pylons for weapons made of polymer resin, also from the Ukrainian manufacturer ResKit. It is known throughout the world for its good quality and wide range of supplements for every taste. In aviation, armored vehicles, figures, everyone will find something for themselves. By the way, this is not an advertisement, I'm just sharing my impressions. To be honest, this is one of the first models on which I use 3D printed parts. Working with them is a little different from working with ordinary cast resin, as the parts are almost completely ready for use. You only need to carefully separate the pylons from the supports and clean the parts where they meet the model. The print quality is so excellent that the weapon holders did not even need to be glued into the middle of the pylon. The pylon itself also perfectly took its place on the wing without additional processing and adjustment of the part. The specificity of this model is that it is impossible to glue the side panels first and then the wings. Must be done the other way around, which adds some inconvenience to the assembly. But this order of gluing the parts did not affect the quality of the assembly of the model itself. The parts are assembled perfectly. Into the overall impression, it is incredible that such an old model can be assembled so simply without tons of putty and many hours spent on sanding models. Before priming and painting the model, need to install the landing gears and some small etching details. This etch kit came with a resin radar which really impressed me. It was like a little bonus. There are not many details, but there is everything to give the model a more original look. Also at this stage I installed the helicopter exhaust mounts. Before that, I needed to cut this same height detail in the plastic. Yes, it's metallic details again, and this time it's a late version stabilizer. I was impressed with the quality of the casting and riveting. Literally in a few minutes of cleaning, the parts are ready for installation. This model will have several additions from metallic details, but more on them later. Also at this stage it is time to install optical guidance devices. These parts cannot be glued and they will remain rotatable, which will make it possible to change their position from time to time. Before gluing transparent parts, I make masks from paper tape. Another panel is also attached from the inside, which was also included with 3D decals. After gluing the transparent parts, I paint the canopy frame with the same primer so that the middle is also black like the entire cockpit. Although, in principle, this did not make sense, since the main primer on the model will also be black. A few more small details and the model is ready to be covered with a primer. This is a primer and microfiller from Alclad 2. The primer fits very well on plastic, dries very quickly and has the effect of leveling the surface and hiding small defects. There is only one very big minus: its smell. A respirator and good ventilation in the room are mandatory. And then there's the technique of preshading, which consists in illuminating the panels with a brighter color, which in the end will give a non-uniform effect of paint burning on the surface of the helicopter. I used the golden yellow paint from AH-64D in this case. I use this technique a lot on my model aircraft. It is not difficult and the final result is impressive. Just the need to practice a little. Write in the comments what kind of technique do you use when painting your helicopter models, and I will mark those that I use. For the main color, I use paint AH-64D RLM83 Olive Drab Green. The paint must be diluted with an acrylic solvent before use through an airbrush. I do it about 50% on 50%. I apply thin layers to the model, gradually covering the surface with color, and with this I control the visibility of the pre-shading until I am satisfied with the result. This time, 3 thin layers were enough, which satisfied me completely. After 24 hours of paint drying, I continued working. I make an imitation of white sealant around the transparent parts of the cockpit. Everything is simple, at a short distance from the paper masks. I will also paste it with paper tape and paint it within white. A thin strip is obtained all around. It's a simple and perfect way to simulate the sealing effect of cockpit canopy. It's time for decals. One very important step is omitted in the video: applying a thick layer of glossy acrylic varnish from Tamiya X22. There is nothing interesting to say about the decals. Printed without color shift, the base is thin and strong at the same time. The decals were fixed on the surface using special chemicals from Tamiya. According to the liveries offered by the instructions, everything is also banal. Several standard variants of the US Army Aviation. There are not many decals so quickly. And no, not quickly, forgot to show again. A thick layer of glossy varnish from Tamiya and again 24 hours of waiting. And then wash. Here I decided not to invent anything new. I applied the liquid to the panel lines and rivets, waited 10 to 15 minutes and removed the excess with solvent and a rag. Tamiya accent panel lines black is a good universal option that has never let me down. The process is quite simple, but there is a lot of riveting on the model and it takes a lot of time. I do it in the same way on other parts of the helicopter. This procedure adds volume to the model. After waiting a few hours for the wash to dry completely, apply a layer of matte acrylic varnish from Vallejo. The plus of this varnish is that it dries very quickly and you can continue working with the model in just a short time. But there is also a minus: if you apply too thick a layer of varnish, the paint starts to change its shade to blue. After applying the varnish, it seemed to me that the color on the model was too dark and I decided to lighten the color with self-made Filtra light green oil brush from AH-64D oiled paint. I dissolve the oil paint with a solvent to an almost transparent state, approximately 10:1, and evenly apply it to the matte surface of the model. This technique is often used when painting and weathering models of military vehicle, and since the Apache is a flying tank, it will also work here. Also, with the help of oil paint, I imitate rain mark and weathering effects on the body of the helicopter by applying different shades with vertical lines and shading it with a brush dipped in solvent in vertical movements. Friends, write in the comments if you like to heavily soil your models with weather effects and what liquids and techniques you use. It will be very interesting for me to read. And maybe I will discover something new for myself that I can use in the future. And to give a metallic effect to the engine nozzles, I apply and rub dry pigment polished steel from AH-64D with the brush. And with liquid chrome from Molotov, I paint the rods of shock absorbers on the main chassis and the rear chassis struts. There are only a few steps left to finish the work on the main fuselage. Namely, install wheels that were previously painted, washed, and contaminated with dry pigments of concrete dust from AH-64D. and also install a few more parts on the engines. The helicopter has a rich lighting equipment, which includes navigation and flashing lights. To simulate the reflector of the flashing lights, I again used liquid chrome from Molotov and glue the transparent parts with ultra glue from AH-64D. This glue is ideal for fixing transparent parts as it leaves no traces after complete drying. It can also be used to fix photo etching and 3D decals. Its fixation is not strong and it dries for a long time, which allows you to position the parts slowly and in case. I cover the navigation lights with transparent varnishes from Tamiya. On the right are green and on the left are red. From the heated and stretched black sprue, I make the sensors that are missing on the surface of the model on the front of the helicopter. Be careful when handling fire. And there is also a landing light that extends from the fuselage. I did it in an open position. In the middle, I insert a ready-made imitation light reflector from the ELF and glue the transparent part also with ultra glue from AH-64D. The main work has already been completed and the paper masks can be removed from the transparent parts of the cockpit and optical devices. Now you can see in all its glory the imitation of the sealant and its line thickness. Here it is. A crown for a king. M230 automatic machine gun. And this is its reduced copy from metallic details. Fully 3D printed, extremely detailed, with excellent printing and loads of detail. The instructions are detailed and will prevent mistakes. All the parts are extremely small and look quite brittle, but the polymer resin is quite strong and there were no problems during assembly. It took a little time, but the result is amazing. The machine gun looks extremely realistic. I still wanted to replace the barrel of the gun with a metal one, but after a detailed examination of the parts from the kit, I realized that it made no sense, since it was detailed perfectly and was not inferior to anything metal. Then everything is according to the classic primer Alclad 2 black and then the basic green color. And guys, do not forget to leave your like under the video and write everything you can think of about the assembly of the model. And those who wish can become a sponsor of my channel to support development and give me inspiration to work harder. Thank you. The metal parts of the barrel were painted with metallic alkylide to polished metal, gunmetal, and copper. Then machine gun took its place under the fuselage. Next I glued the hanging weapons on the wings of the helicopter. Unfortunately, only blocks of unguided rockets. I decided not to hang Hellfire anti-tank missiles, since they did not look realistic enough from the kit, and I did not have aftermarket ones. And at the very end, as the last step before completing the assembly of the helicopter, I glue the angle of attack sensors to the nacelles of the engines. That's all. The helicopter is ready. The only thing left is that without which the helicopter cannot fly. The main rotor. In fact, the main rotor of the helicopter was assembled parallel to the model. I left the assembly at the very end to structure the video. This is a convenient way to save time. For example, while the varnish is drying on the helicopter, I can build weapons or paint the wheels. The rotor is easy to assemble. It has few details, but everything is cast neatly and flawlessly. I will not leave the main rotor without the aftermarket. It is a resin radar of the company decals, mentioned many times today. It will finish the final look of the model. In fact, the model also used a 3D printed rear rotor, also from metallic details, which was painted and installed on the model. And I also had resin wheels that I did not use, as they were cast without imitation of mounting, which had plastic wheels from the kit. I paint the base of the tilting machine dark olive green and the blades in black. On the radar, I will try to simulate the scratches found on a real helicopter after long-term use. To begin with, I paint in a bright green color. Then I cover it with a special liquid for scratches from MMO. Next, I paint in the main color. After the paint has completely dried, you can easily wet the paint with water. And when you wipe it with a brush, realistic paint chips will appear on the surface. At the end, I varnish everything with Vallejo matte varnish. I also imitate the weather effects on the blades with oil paint by rubbing it along the plane of the propeller as it rotates. In a real helicopter, the rotor blades are heavy and hang down during parking. I tried to simulate this moment in a simple way. I loaded the blades and heated the plastic with a hair dryer. The main thing is to control the temperature and not to overheat the plastic so that it does not deform. After the plastic had hardened, this effect appeared. That's all for today. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you liked my version of the legendary helicopter in the 48th scale, and I advise you to watch the video until the very end. There will be spoilers about the next build. See you in the next videos. Bye.